It's no secret what Trump and his allies mean when they talk about shock and awe. Americans were supposed to be stunned by the opening salvo of Donald Trump's second term. In fact, his aides and allies took pains to describe his initial flurry of executive activity as shock and awe, reviving an analogy to the 2003 invasion of Iraq when American troops pounded Saddam Hussein's army. But in much of the same way, the President George W. Bush believed he was cowing America's enemies with an overwhelming display of military might. Trump believes he's pounding his domestic political enemies into submission. Trump also believes, I imagine, that he and his acolytes will be greeted as liberators. It's possible that flooding the zone, another metaphor made popular by Trump's ascendants, in this way will disorient the president's opponents. But the other way to think about this shotgun approach to undermining the federal government is that it is galvanizing them. Consider the administration targets the entire federal workforce, the FBI, the intelligence services, and anyone who has a direct interest in a rational, consistent, and nonpartisan federal bureaucracy. Perhaps they will slink away in defeat, or perhaps they'll attempt to fight back using whatever tools they have. Some appointees have filed lawsuits contesting their dismissals, and then there's the extent to which anger and these maneuvers have kindled, in some Democrats at least, the fires of resistance. On Tuesday, for example, a large group of congressional Democrats were joined by ordinary Americans demanding to know why Elon Musk has been allowed to ransack the Treasury Department and other government agencies. 2 weeks ago, the Democratic Party seemed prepared to just give Trump what he wanted in Congress, and now there's a real chance that Democrats will try to slow business in the Senate to a halt and may even refuse to negotiate on the budget deal and the debt ceiling. If Democrats are not thinking about this, then they should be. There's no reason to negotiate with the White House and the Republican Party that don't believe they are bound by congressional spending. If nothing else, as long as Musk can, quote unquote, delete entire federal agencies, there's no reason to treat an agreement as anything other than a suggestion. As for the analogy to the Iraq War, my colleague Michael Goldberg notes that the White House is pursuing something analogous to the de-Baathification pursued by the Coalition Provision Authority during the American occupation of Iraq. J.D. Vance even called for a literal de-Baathification of the federal government while speaking on a right-wing podcast in 2021, telling his host that should Trump return to the White House, he should fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, he said. This is exactly what the administration has tried to do, recruiting young ideologues to purge the civil service of nonpartisan bureaucrats. Of course, as Goldberg writes, the de-Baathification that Vance wanted to emulate is widely seen as a disaster that contributed to the deadly chaos and instability that followed America's invasion. It seems very possible that in taking a wrecking ball to the federal bureaucracy and unconstitutionally slashing programs, employees, and entire agencies, Trump and Musk may spark a catastrophe that neither they nor allies can contain. At the very least, and if we take Musk's stewardship of X as an example, we will be left with a degraded federal government that is much less efficient than what came before, where Americans who depend on federal benefits are potentially left without. More ominously, given Musk's apparent control of the federal payment system, which was temporarily suspended Saturday morning by a federal judge, we may be entering a world in which Trump's political appointees have the ability to unilaterally end funding for anyone or anything they deem inefficient, unproductive, or insufficiently loyal to the president. And in that world where Trump is essentially a personalist autocrat, the Constitution is little more than a piece of paper. And there is one other way in which you can use the second Iraq War to understand the present state of things in American politics. We are told that there is a shift underway to a conservative cultural atmosphere of deference to and accommodation with the MAGA movement. But this is not some amorphous transformation in the ether. It's a result of individuals making deliberate choices about how to exist in the current political environment. Powerful individuals and institutions in the news media, business, and politics are choosing to align themselves with what they believe to be a new order. Viewed as an active choice and not a passive evolution, this vibe shift looks quite a lot like the war fever of 2002-2003, when political and cultural elites decided that they had more to gain through submission and accommodation than they did with criticism and resistance. A man cannot believe that he is about to be destroyed, observed the Soviet author Vasily Grossman. The soil of hope, a hope that was senseless and sometimes dishonest and despicable, gave birth to a pathetic obedience that was often equally despicable. And this by New York Times on DNYUZ. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.